evening, and welcome to Casio's webinar series on equity in education. My name is Amy Chow, and I am Casio's National and Training Product Manager. As a longstanding member and supporter through scholarships of both the Benjamin Banneker Association and TOTUS, Casio is proud to partner with them in these important discussions. The title for tonight's webinar is Creating Equitable Classrooms via Culturally Inclusive Mathematics Teaching. We are honored to have Dr. Marilyn Strutchens speaking tonight. For the sake of webinar quality, we are keeping everyone muted and all videos turned off except for the presenter. If you have a question or comment, please type it in the chat panel and make sure to send it to everyone. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on Casio Education's YouTube channel and BBA's website. Also, a certificate of attendance will be available upon request. Before we begin the session, I would like to take some time to share some ways Casio is continuing to support education. Casio created the Casio Cares program to support educators, parents, and students during this time of remote learning. This program gives free access to our calculator emulator software through the end of December, free online training through the end of December, and numerous free activities and videos to help support your curriculum. Casio has always provided high quality and affordable technology for everyone. Most recently, we released our newest graphing calculator to the FX9750G3, and our free web-based dynamic mathematics software, ClassPad.net, to continue to address the technology access gap and support students, parents, and teachers. As part of the Casio Cares program, we have also extended free access to ClassPad.net's add-in functionality of AP Statistics and Computer Algebra System through the end of the year. To learn more about our Casio Cares program, calculators, and software, visit CasioEducation.com. And now, Bria Ratliff from BBA will share their mission statement and introduce Dr. Strutchens. Bria?
Thank you, Amy. The Benjamin Banneker Association Incorporated is a national nonprofit organization dedicated to the mathematics education advocacy, establishing a presence for leadership and professional development to support teachers in leveling the playing field for mathematics learning of the highest quality for African American students. The vision of our organization is we believe that all children, particularly African American children, have access to the highest quality mathematics education that will empower them to gain self-confidence, the enthusiasm and endurance needed to succeed in mathematics and to transform themselves and their communities. This evening, I have the distinct pleasure of welcoming and introducing one of my mentors and my graduate advisor, Dr. Marilyn E. Strutchens, who is the Interim Department Head of Curriculum and Training at Auburn University. Dr. Marilyn Strutchens is an Emily R. and Gerald S. Leshuk Endowed Professor and the Mildred Cheshire Fraley Distinguished Professor of Mathematics Education, as well as, again, the Interim Department Head for Curriculum and Teaching at Auburn University in Alabama. She is the leader of the Mathematics Teacher Education Partnership's Clinical Experiences Research Action Cluster, the chair of Advisory Committee for the National Science Foundation's Directorate for Education and Human Resources, and an advisory member for the AAAS initiative, Stimulating Research and Innovation in STEM Teacher Pre-Service Education. Dr. Strutchens was a member of the National Council of Teacher of Mathematics Board of Directors. She's a member of the Executive Board of Directors for the Conference Board of Mathematical Sciences and president of the Association of Mathematics Teacher Educators. In 2017, she also received AMTE's Judith Jacobs Lectureship. Her research interests include examining equity and access issues in mathematics education, with a particular focus on impacting students' engagement and achievement in mathematics. She also focuses on improving teacher practices and exploring innovative field placement experiences for secondary teacher candidates through an equity lens. Dr. Strutchens served as the editor or co-editor for several books, including Educating Prospective Secondary Mathematics Teachers, ICME 13's Topic Surveys, the Mathematics Education of Prospective Secondary Teachers Around the World, AMTE's second monograph series, the 2012 Special Equity issue of the Journal of Mathematics Teacher Education, and the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics Focus on High School Teacher Education, and focus on high school mathematics, fostering reasoning and sense-making for all students and Changing the Faces of Mathematics, Perspectives on African Americans. She has also authored and co-authored numerous book chapters and journal articles. So again, it is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Marilyn Stretchins this evening, and I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Bria. I'm really excited to be with you all tonight and share with you. So again, the title of my presentation is Creating Equitable Classrooms via Culturally Inclusive Mathematics Teaching. And so I'm going to start by setting the stage, and then throughout the presentation, I'll go through different ways that we can include culture into the mathematics lesson. Use students' culture to help students learn mathematics, ethnomathematics, identify diverse cultural contributions, explore mathematics using cultural artifacts, use mathematics to study social or cultural issues, and then use mathematics literature as a context for mathematical problem solving. So this is the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics position statement on equity, at least excerpts from it, and it states, excellence in mathematics education rests on equity, high expectations, respect, understanding, and strong support for all students. Policies, practices, attitudes, and beliefs are related to mathematics teaching and learning and must be assessed continuously to ensure that all students have equal access to the resources with the greatest potential to promote learning. And let me repeat that again, that all students have equal access to the resources with the greatest potential to promote learning. A culture of equity maximizes the learning potential of all students. Different solutions, interpretations, and approaches that are mathematically sound must be celebrated and integrated into classroom deliberations about problems. All members of the classroom group must accept the responsibility to engage with and support one another throughout the learning experience. And that's how we really incorporate different cultures into the mathematics classroom, by helping all students to feel valued and to be able to participate in the discussion. One of the first key recommendation from catalyzing change in high school mathematics, initiating critical conversations, is each and every student should learn the essential concepts in order to expand professional opportunities, understand and critique the world, and experience the joy, wonder, and beauty of mathematics. And through doing so, we celebrate not only the students' cultures, but other cultures as well. And then we also want to think about equity is extended from a unidirectional exchange as primarily benefiting growth of students and student groups that have historically been denied equal access, opportunity, and outcomes in mathematics to a reciprocal approach. We contend that as a field, we need to think of diversity as a resource for the learning of mathematics for all students. Thinking about all students bring something to the table, and we need to value what they bring to the table. And so now let's look more closely at culture inclusive mathematics. So I want you to write into the chat what comes to mind when you hear the word culture. So just take a minute and write in the chat what comes to your mind when you hear the word culture. And I'm just going to ask Karen to read off a few of the responses that you gave.
The norms, behaviors, and habits that are common among a group of people, whether explicit or implicit, values and beliefs, ways of doing things, traditions, the way you're brought up, a lot of tradition and values, arts, beliefs, language.
Okay, thank you, Karen. And here's a summary of the meaning of culture from Bouillevant, 1989. A group's program for survival in and adaptation to its environments. The cultural program consists of knowledge, concepts, and values shared by group members through systems of communication. And that's bringing in some of the responses that you gave. Culture also consists of shared beliefs, symbols, and interpretations within a human group. People within a culture usually interpret the meanings of symbols, artifacts, and behaviors in the same or in similar ways. And so a cultural group has a lot of things in common, and they have common beliefs. And also, I wanted to give a nod to Gloria Ladson-Spilling's culturally relevant teaching. She states that teachers work to help their students better understand what racism is, how it works, and what they can do to work against it. Students treated as competent are likely to demonstrate competence, and that's very important. We want to treat all of our students as if they are competent and that they can do mathematics. We want to infuse into them confidence in their mathematics ability and positive mathematics identities. Provide instructional scaffolding for students allows them to move from what they know to what they do not know. And that's why it's so important to build on what students bring to the table in the mathematics classroom. The major focus of the classroom must be instructional. Real education is about extending students' thinking and ability beyond what they already know. Effective pedagogical practice involves in-depth knowledge of students as well as the subject matter. And that's very important because in order to create relevant context for students, you need to know who your students are and their backgrounds. So let's first look at the first way of including culture into the mathematics classroom. Use students' culture to help students learn mathematics. So just think about this for a second. I know you're gonna laugh, but what kind of pie do you prefer for Thanksgiving dinner? Pumpkin, sweet potato, shoe fly, or other? So just write in the chat what pie you prefer for Thanksgiving dinner. I bet you're wondering, where did that shoe fly pie come from?
I am wondering that question.
Well, I think my husband may not mind if I tell you the story. My husband is from Pennsylvania and he loves Pennsylvania Dutch cooking. And we were on our way home from Auburn to Georgia. And we stopped at a store in Fort Valley, Georgia that had Mennonite food and they had shoe fly pies. And my husband got really excited. He said, wow, your family will love this shoe fly pie. And I was like, mm-hmm. And nobody knew what it was. So that brings in the cultural differences.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it actually tastes pretty good, but my family wasn't ready for it. So
okay, it looks like there's a tie between sweet potato and pumpkin.
Okay.
Just saying.
So those are the more traditional pies that people eat during Thanksgiving. And the reason why I asked this question is I read an article by Bill Tate a while back where he talked about a pre-service teacher that wanted to get students engaged in a lesson that's centered around pumpkins. And one way that she didn't engage all of the students was that she didn't ask students what they enjoyed for Thanksgiving. She just talked about pumpkins. And then so that left some of the students out. But a way that would have engaged students in the lesson, even if they didn't like pumpkin pie, would have been to ask them what types of desserts do they eat for Thanksgiving. And oftentimes I've been in stores where they're giving away pumpkin pies and I'm like, well, what about sweet potato pies? That's what I like. And so it's like thinking about people coming from different cultures. And even though you may not have, because like with pumpkins, you can cut them open, count the seeds, and do a whole lot of different things with them in a classroom in terms of counting the seeds, especially in elementary grades. They can count, put 10 in a cup and then keep counting. Then they have 10 groups of 10. And so you can really get into some place value kinds of things with counting pumpkin seeds. But one way of engaging all students into thinking about the lesson is to ask them what kind of pies do they eat for Thanksgiving, or if they even eat pie for Thanksgiving. So that way you kind of build on their backgrounds. You're inviting them into the lesson, even though the lesson may not focus on what they enjoy in particular, but you're, because what you're doing now is you're introducing them to someone else's culture, but by asking them what they like first, you're acknowledging that they may not eat pumpkin pie. And so centric teaching is an important concept guiding equitable mathematics teaching, and it is to center students in the process of knowledge acquisition and to build on their culture and community experiences. Furthermore, in a diverse setting, each child is afforded an opportunity to see the world through the experience of others. Children who are centered in their own culture, information, are better students, more disciplined, and have greater motivation for schoolwork. And the launch of a lesson is where you can begin centering the lesson on students. The teacher launches the problem with the whole class in the first phase of a lesson. This involves helping students understand the problem's setting, the mathematical context, and the challenge. So the following questions can help teachers prepare for the launch. So ahead of time, you want to think about, what are students expected to do? What do the students need to know to understand the context of the story and the challenge of the problem? What difficulties can I foresee for students? So really thinking about what problems students might have so that you can have good questions ready to facilitate their learning. How can I keep from giving away too much of the problem? And so really being cognizant of how can you maintain the cognitive demand of the problem while still helping students to think about what the problem is asking them to do. And then the launch phase is also the time when the teacher introduces new ideas, clarifies definitions, reviews old concepts, and connects the problem to past experiences of the students. I've been in classrooms where I've actually observed teacher candidates launching a lesson with students and seeing the students really get engaged in the lesson, because the way that they actually launched the lesson helped students to think about their own families, their backgrounds, and how they could actually relate to the lesson. And so then the students were actually participating in solving a problem that they were owners of, because they had initially thought about how the problem related to them. So problem, and then also building off of connecting the problem to students' own family backgrounds and things that they have experienced. It's also important to engage students in problem posing strategies. Let students specify some quantities sometimes in the problems that you present. Let students frame problem questions. Promote problem posing at various points throughout your lesson. Invite students to interpret representations. Allowing students to pose problems can help us to learn what students know and gain insight into the new knowledge they are developing. So here's a problem, and this also was in the article that I read by Bill Tate, where a teacher was posing a lesson to posing a problem to students, and then one of the students started thinking about the problem and thought about it in a different way. And thought about it in a different way. The student wondered why prices in a convenience store is often more expensive than prices in a grocery store. And then the class wanted to investigate that more to see if, in fact, that was true for most items that were the same in a convenience store compared to the same item in a grocery store, if in fact the prices were higher. And so this was a problem that the student posed, and it really got other students as well engaged in wanting to know the answer to that problem. And so another way of getting students engaged in problem solving is for parents to engage students in problem solving when you're doing things at home. Like every Christmas, my mother, my sister, and I, when we're together, cook superb walnut cookies. And so if all three of us want to take a batch home, what can we do to the recipe to ensure that we all get a good batch of cookies to take home? So write in the chat what you would do to the recipe.
People like your picture.
Oh, okay. But what would they do to the recipe?
Triple it. So that seems to
Okay.
be the go-to answer.
Okay.
I'd say do it times 6 because then everyone gets a double recipe.
Oh, wow.
We all want more cookies.
Okay. So if my sister and I were only going to take a batch, then we would double it. But then if all three of us took a batch, we would triple it. And so you could let your child think about how could you double the recipe? What would that entail? And so it gives children some practice with fractions and also just even whole numbers in some cases. And so really getting them to think about how could you even represent doubling and tripling? Okay, and then for you, for all of those who are sports enthusiasts, so just thinking about oftentimes when I'm watching basketball or football, I think about the points and like, if you just saw the score, how could that score come about? So these are the points systems for both basketball and football scores. So given the scoring systems for basketball and football, what are some possible combinations of scores that would add to 56 total points in a basketball and or football game? So just take a couple of minutes and think about what combination of scores would you put together, or types of categories of scores for 56 points in basketball or 56 points in football. And just write a couple of your answers in the chat.
They're all doing the math.
Oh, okay.
Football, 9 touchdowns, missed the extra point, and then a safety. Very clever.
All right,
9 touchdowns. Good team.
cool. What else did we get?
They're still doing the math.
Okay.
Oh, there's a terrible kicker on the team. Yeah, he's out of a job. They always are.
Uh-oh.
I mean, you could have 56 free shots in basketball. Unrealistic, but
True.
could happen.
Someone got
28
fouled a
2-point
lot.
shots for basketball. Okay.
Okay.
Two 3-point shots and 25 2-point shots, also basketball.
Okay.
There's really a ton of combinations. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah, that right?
Yes, so it's just, and so you see how you can really get students to thinking about the mathematics, what are possible combinations that you can come up with, and then see if they do it in a systematic way, or they just start thinking about different combinations of points that could add up to 56. And you could even give them other total point scores and have them back into the different combinations. But it's something that the students might be interested in doing, and it relates and it gets them to kind of start thinking about patterns and relationships as well. And they practice their basic facts.
Yeah, number sense.
Yes. And so moving along, ethnomathematics, and you'll see that all of these different categories are not totally separate from each other. You'll see a lot of overlap. And so with ethnomathematics, it is mathematics which is practiced among identifiable culture groups, national tribal societies, labor groups, children of a certain age bracket, professional classes. Its identity depends largely on focuses of interest, on motivation, and on certain codes and jargons which do not belong to the realm of academic mathematics. So it's what people do, like carpenters and other people on their job that they wouldn't do with pencil and paper, but their methods are just as proficient. And they take shortcuts in order to be able to do their jobs well. And so just here are some examples. The examination of ratios, patterns, and symmetry in Japanese origami, logic of kin relationships in Wapira, Australia, probably didn't pronounce that correctly, chance and strategy games and puzzles from various Native American tribes, measuring and ratios in traditional quilting patterns, fractals in African design, shapes and design and graffiti from hip hop culture. And then Gloria Gilmer actually saw patterns in observing African-American hairstylists for hours. She wrote a paper that showed how the hair braiding enterprise can contribute to mathematics education, and conversely, what mathematics education can contribute to the hair braiding enterprise, through a discussion of not tessellations, but what? Tressellations, box braids, and triangles. She showed how the activity could generate many mathematics applications. And so this just kind of shows how the shape is being tessellated across her head, kind of similar to the pineapple and the hexagons being tessellated here. And then this is a video from the University of Hawaii, and it just kind of gives more perspectives on what ethnomathematics is. Okay, so I just wanted to share that clip with you. The University of Hawaii has a graduate program centered around ethnomathematics, and it's just showing just how important ethnomathematics is becoming. And so what I'd like for you to do now is just take a few minutes and list any examples of ethnomathematics you may have encountered. Or if you've seen people using ethnomathematics.
So the mathematics of weaving, crocheting, knitting, and obviously, especially quilts.
Okay. And actually, I crochet. I'm a one hook person. I haven't learned how to knit yet. That I can see. What about others beyond crafts?
I have one, but I feel like it's not appropriate for me to say. But I have a friend.
Oh, okay.
I have a friend who's a sniper, and
Oh,
the mathematics in determining the air, you know, like the wind and the distance and the all that is so geometric, and it's amazing the math that goes on in a split second.
wow.
Even though it's a horrible example, but it's
Yeah.
amazing math that they're doing in their head in seconds.
Wow.
Shopkeeper math.
Yes. Okay. So just want people to think about, and then you may be using some ethnomathematics or taking shortcuts in your daily lives that you're not aware of because you use it all the time. Even thinking about like how you figure out tips, you take shortcuts and things like that. And so just thinking about how you use mathematics in efficient ways for the job that you're doing at the moment and something you do all the time. And one of the things that really was funny to me is I was walking across campus one day and some carpenters were building like a small temporary storage building. And I heard the guy say, "That's the Pythagorean theorem." And I was like, "What?" And I said, "Why did you say that's the Pythagorean theorem?" And he started talking to me about right angles. And so like with building, right angles are very important. And so I just thought that that was interesting that as I walked by, he said Pythagorean theorem.
That is. Gary mentioned carpenters, so that relates to that.
Yes. Okay. Somehow I keep drawing some red lines. I'm trying to figure out where that's coming from. But, and then moving on to mathematical artifacts. Exploring mathematics using cultural artifacts, students may discover mathematical knowledge of their culture. Students can learn how mathematics is an intricate part of society. And patterns and symmetry and culture, children take pride in the contributions of their ancestors as they learn about other cultures. Teachers and students can investigate patterns and symmetry found in the architecture, clothing, pottery, and baskets of many cultures. And so just think about where you see mathematics in the world around you. A lot of times I see it in tilings. Had the opportunity once to go to Portugal, and we saw all kinds of mathematics in the tiles and the buildings in where we visited. And then I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with Escher's tessellations. A lot of people make them in classrooms. And so that's beautiful art that people imitate all the time. And then we mentioned quilting as a part of ethnomathematics. And these are some really beautiful quilts, and you can see all kinds of mathematics in the quilts. You see symmetry, you see rotations, you see fractals. And so students can explore a lot of different mathematics through looking at quilts. Okay. And then I didn't show a whole lot of different things with artifacts, but like I said, they're all around us. And I encourage you to have your students to do scavenger hunts sometimes, looking for the mathematics and the artifacts around them. And so use mathematics to study social or cultural issues, social justice lessons. Within a social justice lesson, the goals for students is to develop social political consciousness and awareness of the social, political, economic, historical, and cultural context of their lives, society, and the world. A sense of social agency, a view of themselves as people able to affect change in the world. And then positive culture and social identities, youth who are strongly rooted in their home languages and cultures and have the confidence and capacities to stand up for that for which they believe. And then also one of the things about incorporating social justice lessons into the mathematics classroom is that it helps students to look for evidence to support their arguments for why they believe something is an injustice or why something isn't an injustice. So teaching with the social justice stance promotes two types of agencies: mathematical problem-solving agency. Students with a high sense of agency make decisions about their participation in mathematics, make sense of problems and persevere in solving them. They reason abstractly and quantitatively. They construct viable arguments and critique the reasoning of others. And then also a sense of social agency, as I just described, a view of themselves as people able to affect change in the world. Mathematics can be used as a tool to read the world. So one of the books that I know people have probably started looking at more lately because it relates to a lot of the events that have been happening in the world, especially over the summer. And some of it is continuing because of some of the verdicts that have been given out and because some of the injustices are still happening. This is a children's literature book called Rosa. It was written by Nikki Giovanni and illustrated by Brian Collier. And the story is really enlightening because it talks about the civil rights movement. It talks about how Rosa Parks refused to give up her bus seat. And really, she wasn't in the wrong section of the bus. She was in the neutral seating on the bus. And she decided to sit down to stand up for all the injustices. She was tired, and she decided to sit down in order to stand up. And she sparked the bus boycotts. And then the other picture you see is a map of the protests that were happening this summer, and thinking about why people were protesting. And one of the things that really sparked a lot of the protests was the killing of George Floyd, and then also the killing of Breonna Taylor and others. So you can get students to think about both, like what was happening during the time of Rosa Parks and then what is happening now. Like, what was Rosa Parks' occupation? She was a seamstress, and this just kind of goes through the book, talking about her life and what she did. And then why did Rosa Parks refuse to give up her bus seat? Why was it important for others to protest against the Jim Crow laws? Who led the march against the Jim Crow laws? Why did the laws change? Why is it important to stand up for what is right? And then today, what sparked the marches against police violence? Why is it important for all people to speak out against the police violence of Black Americans? What other injustices should people stand against? What immediate actions were taken as a result of the protests? What other actions can people take to affect long-term change? And then these are some problems that were created based on the Rosa Parks story related to the bus boycotts. And then today, problem-solving protests against police violence. In what states were protests held? What is the percentage of US states in which protests were held? And so you could use the map or a more updated map today. In Rosa, bus boycotting was used to impact change. What might people do today that will impact the economy and bring about change? state why what you are proposing will bring about positive change. And then what other questions might you ask students in terms of thinking about civil rights and protests against violence and other inequities? So just take a couple of minutes to write in the chat. What other questions might we ask students?
I'm not seeing anything yet.
Okay,
Sorry.
that's okay.
Oh,
Okay.
here's one. Why are more people of color dying of COVID-19? Great question.
Yes. Inequities related to healthcare.
Yeah.
And we could probably go on and on. What other questions might we ask?
Why are unemployment rates so different across groups?
Good question. And a lot of these questions can send students to the internet and other places to look for data to answer the questions. And then leading to statistical analysis to answer the questions. Other questions?
What is the percentage of Black people killed by police?
And just the other day, I saw like someone was doing a chronology of some of the more heard about cases.
And Crystal is saying they can compare that percentage to white people, and you could even do it state by state or certain cities.
Okay.
How many grocery stores are available in communities with a large minority population?
Okay.
Oh, that's
Getting
an
into
interesting
food
question.
deserts and
Yeah.
so on. So this is really good because there are a lot of social justice problems that we can solve, right? Or we can't necessarily solve them, but we can think about them and then try to help move people towards solving them, and bringing the issues to the forefront. Thank you all for your participation in the chats. I really appreciate your responses.
Here's one from Pam. Are protests likely to lead to COVID-19 increases or political rallies? From Gary.
Okay. So
And-
just go ahead.
Okay. Ask about wait times at voting polls across different communities. Oh, that's a great one. That's
Yes.
monitoring the election coming up.
Yes.
How do the percentages of individuals given a particular sentence for a specific crime vary depending upon race, gender, etc.? Are the sentences the same? That would.
Wow. So some really deep questions that need to be answered. And so some of the other things that I suggested are related to ones that you all came up with, data related to racial profiling, food deserts, wages and housing rates, and then gerrymandering. Okay, and then, well, I need to speed up a little bit. So my next one is identify diverse cultural contributions. And so just quickly see how many mathematicians you can name. If you can only think of one that's not European, just write that in the chat. So just write one in the chat instead of 5.
What is her name?
So how are we doing? Karen, are we getting
David Blackwell.
Okay.
From 2 different people. Emily, I'm going to say this wrong. Nother.
Okay. Nother. Give about one more minute and then we'll move.
That's a tough question. Just kidding.
And so it's really important for us to help students know that people like them have contributed to the mathematics that we know today.
Does like
And-
Madame Curie count? Even though she's a scientist, she's really very, it's mathematics. Okay, Katherine Jackson,
Okay,
Sophie Germain, Chris
All right.
Jett.
okay,
We got their juices flowing.
all right. And so, so three of the three younger ladies graduated from the University of Maryland at the same time. And that was big news in those days. And it's still big news today when you have that many female African-American mathematicians graduating at the same time. And we want to have more female mathematicians graduating as well as males with their PhDs in mathematics and engineering and other STEM fields. And then Evelyn Boyd Grenville, she was the second African-American woman to receive her PhD in mathematics. So it's kind of neat seeing her with the three younger ladies. And then, of course, a lot of us have read Hidden Figures and have seen the movie. And then we know that Katherine Johnson died this past year. And she had lived a long, fruitful life. And then the American Mathematical Society features one of their mathematical moments on Hidden Figures. And they actually have an interview with one of the ladies, Christine Darden.
I'm Mike Breen, Public Awareness Officer for the American Mathematical Society, and I'm talking with Christine Darden, who's a former engineer at NASA, was there for 40 years, and among many things she did was she led the NASA's sonic boom team, which worked on supersonic flight, and Christine was in the book Hidden Figures, which is what we're going to be talking about now, or the background to that. Christine, can you tell us what it was like to be at NASA?
Well, of course, I went there just before they walked on the moon. So all of the excitement of that was very much going on when I got there. And the group that I went to work in was the reentry physics branch, had worked on how the satellites and things came back into the Earth's atmosphere. But they had done most of those calculations for the Apollo program before I got there. But NASA was at its peak when I got there. And because of that, within a few years, they started cutting back. After we reached the moon, I think it was President Nixon that said, well, now we need to start saving some of that money, and started cutting some of the programs and things. And so NASA actually had to let a lot of people go and cut back on their numbers, but it was still a great place to work because it was the cutting edge of engineering, and there were a lot of excellent people there to work with. I went into the computer branch when I got there, which is what Hidden Figures was about.
And so if you want to hear more, please go to the site and listen to the interview with Christine Darden. And they also have other mathematical moments in the site that you, as teachers, you would want to share with your students. And then one of my favorite mathematicians is John Urschel. He was a football player in college, and he actually worked on his bachelor's degree and master's degree while he was playing football, and had a 4.0 GPA in the 4 years when he was in school, and has published in an international journal of space dynamics, conducted research on the circular planet three-body problem. He is working on a PhD at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And one thing about him is like his love for mathematics won out over his love for football. And I like that he says there is real elegance in math at a higher level. And I just love that it allows me to problem solve and to just work through things to really produce some beautiful things. And he attributes a lot of his wonderment about mathematics to his mother and how she challenged him. And one of the challenges that she gave him was, instead of giving him an allowance for making his bed or taking out the trash when they went to the store, she would let him keep the change if he could calculate her change before the cashier gave it to her. And so that's pretty neat. And then, so it's getting students thinking about mathematics all the time. Pretty quickly, he became quite good at that. To protect her pocketbook, she upped the challenge. Instead of calculating the change in his head, she had him calculate the sales tax before the cashier rang up the items. So then he actually had to understand percentages and so on. And so I'm not going to ask you to do this problem, but you could ask students to just estimate what the total would be given a 10% tax and so on. And so it gets them into number sense and that even knowing whether or not their calculator is correct when you get them into estimating and so on. And then here are some more websites of mathematicians that you can share with your students. And we'll be able to give you these websites. I'll make a PDF of the PowerPoint and you'll have access to these sites.
Marilyn, real quick, we have about 10 minutes left.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and then finally, multicultural literature as a context for mathematical problem solving with children and parents learning together. This is a project that a colleague and I began at the University of Kentucky years ago. She was in was in literacy, and then I was in mathematics. So she knew a lot of children's literature books, and we worked together to create multicultural literature as a context for mathematical problem solving with children and parents learning together. And one of the things that we have found is that it helps parents understand innovations in mathematics education and how they can reinforce what their children are learning in school at home. It teaches teachers facilitate parents and their children reading literature together and solving related mathematical problems based on prepared modules. Parents and teachers work together to ensure that children are developing their full potential. And then what the literature provides, because mathematical situations are often embedded in the social and cultural context provided by literature, children's multicultural literature is the perfect medium for including culture-related activities in mathematics lesson. Further, multicultural literature offers a context in which readers can celebrate their personal cultures and learn about those of others. And I'll never forget one time I did the multicultural literature program at a church that I attended in Maryland. And one night we did the 100 penny box. And the great aunt Do, she would sway and sing Precious Lord, Take My Hand. And, I attempted to sing it while I was telling the story. And what I thought was so neat was that one of the young girls was there with her grandfather, and she sat in his lap when I started singing Precious Lord, Take My Hand. And so I thought it was so neat. And what was really interesting about that young girl is that she was determined to come to all of the sessions, whether she came with her mother, her father, her grandfather, she was determined to come to each of the sessions. And so it was just really neat to watch families come together around children's literature and solving mathematical problems. And it was really eye-opening for the parents because they learned what their children knew and what they didn't know. And then it also provided them with some ways that they could help their children at home. And so I just really enjoyed doing that program with families. And one of the stories that we read was Sadako and the 1,000 Paper Cranes. And it took us a long time to make those birds. But it's a lot of mathematics unfolding the paper cranes a lot of geometry and symmetry. And then this is a problem that we gave the families related to the story. So because the legend in the story was that if people folded 1,000 paper cranes before Sadako died, that the gods would grant her life. And so Sadako and her family and friends set out to fold 1,000 paper cranes. Sadako became sick in February and died in October. By the time of her death, Sadako, her family, and friends had folded 644 cranes. What was the average amount of cranes folded per day from the time Sadako became ill until her death? And so think about the things that you would need to think about to kind of figure out what the average amount of paper cranes would be. So one of the grandmothers that participated in the program that, since I know that there are 8 months from February to October, and each month has 30 or 31 days except for February, which has 28 days, I just estimated 30 days for each month and came up with 240 days. Then I thought if she made 1 bird a day in 240 days, that would be 240 birds. Then if she made 2 birds a day in 240 days, that would be 480 birds, which is not enough. 3 birds a day in 240 days would be 720 birds. 720 birds are more than what she made. So my scientific answer would be 2-ish. And just to see the smile on her face when she said 2-ish was really neat. But you can see that she started reasoning in tables. You know, like she was reasoning in a way that she could connect it. And then also you can talk about other historical context related to the story, Japanese culture, World War II, bombing of Pearl Harbor, reasons for dropping the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, immediate and lasting effects of the bombing on humans because Sadako died of leukemia, and then other uses of nuclear energy, effects of world peace movement and art of origami. And so, so you could talk about, and another story that I really like reading was The Black Snowman. And it's about a young boy who initially, when the story starts off, Jacob, he's ashamed of being Black. And he talks about a Black tornado tears up your house, a white tornado cleans it up. And he just had all these negative views about being Black. And then one day he and his little brother, Pee-wee, were out in the city snow, and his little brother wanted to build a snowman. And so they built the snowman, and the little brother found a kente cloth and wrapped it around the snowman. And just like Frosty, the snowman became alive. But this particular snowman, because of the magic of the kente cloth, talked about Zulu warriors and people that Jacob could be proud of in terms of being Black. And then by the end of the story, Jacob ends up, he and the Black snowman end up saving his younger brother, Pee-wee, because Pee-wee was collecting bottles and cans to try to raise enough money to save, to buy a present for his mom for Christmas. And the place where he was looking for bottles and cans caught on fire, and Jacob and the snowman end up saving his younger brother. And when they were saving him, the snowman talked to Jacob about Zulu warriors and all of that, helping him to really be proud of his heritage. And one of the things that I really like in the book is that the snowman says to Jacob at one point, what is more important, the white pages or the Black words or the meaning behind the words? So really getting into what's inside of you is what counts the most. And then this is just showing you different connections that you can make to the book. And this is just problem questions related to the story. And then since Pee-wee was collecting bottles and cans, you can get into recycling and so on. And then my final comments related to including culture and working with parents. If we truly hope to achieve equity, excellence, access, and opportunities in mathematics education for every child, we must involve parents and guardians. Parents must become informed about what it means to really know and do mathematics. Parents must become partners with schools in order to ensure that their children receive an equitable mathematics education. Parents and teachers must work together to ensure that children are developing their full mathematics potential. And if we use these different ways of infusing culture in the mathematics classroom, if we make students the center of the classroom and we make the classroom about meaningful mathematics instruction, then we will have more students succeeding in mathematics. Thank you for your participation and your time.
Thank you, Dr. Strutchens. Thank you so much for that presentation. Thank you, Bria and BBA, for your partnership, and thank you to those of you who joined us this evening. As a reminder, this webinar has been recorded and will be available on Casio Education's YouTube channel tomorrow and also on BBA's website. We will also be sharing, as Dr. Strutchens mentioned, the PowerPoint presentation with you in our follow-up email that we will be sending out tomorrow. And if you would like a certificate of attendance, please respond to that email as well. This is the last webinar in this series this year. We want to thank BBA and Todos for partnering with us and allowing us to be a part of this very important conversation. We hope to continue the series next year, so be on the lookout for those webinars. Thank you guys so much for joining us and have a good night.
Good night, everyone.